Well, we've all heard it on the internet, on YouTube, that gimbals are not everything they're cracked up to be. And people have this real anti-opinion about gimbals, and they go, oh, the gimbal shops, they look too mechanical, and, you should shoot handheld, it looks more natural, all this sort of stuff. Now, I'm going to challenge that today, and why I'm going to do that is because I actually really like gimbals. I think that they're a good tool, but it's one of those sorts of tools that you need to learn how to use, and they work extremely well in the hands of someone who knows how to use them. The problem is, if you try to use them like you're shooting handheld, you try to hold it and do a kind of shot like you would do handheld, yes, I agree, it just doesn't look right. There's something about it that just looks wrong. And you need to be very focused and definite about when you move a gimbal. You need to say, I want to start here and I want to finish here. You can't just kind of hold it like as if you was holding a camera handheld and just point it and do that kind of swaying thing that you would do when you're handheld. Now, I'm not saying handheld is bad, but what I am saying is that I've watched a lot of videos, wedding videos especially, and to me, I think in most cases, in my opinion, handheld doesn't work for a lot of people. There is some people who can do it really well, but they're in the minority. But most people, it's very, very difficult to get the footage to look really good because the camera, your axis of your camera and your tilt like this, the sensors, even with IBIS, the camera is struggling to get the picture and the distortion of the picture accurate, and you get jitters and all of this other stuff. Even on a gimbal, you can still get that. But the problem is when you do it handheld, it's far, far more common. And this makes handheld more different. And it also makes you like a human tripod with a slider on top. You tend to need to rock the camera like this, maybe around an item that's in front. So you move the camera around the item in front, and that shot looks great. But if you're shooting like that all day and you're shooting handheld, yeah, you haven't got some mechanical gimbal you have to balance, but it makes the shots very similar. You haven't got the ability to move or do high shots or low shots or move faster or take a number of steps as you would if you had a gimbal. So let's roll the intro and let's have a little bit of talk about how you need to learn to use a gimbal and what are the settings on it. Like you have all these follow settings, and people, I tend not to use them. They keep it in pan follow and just use it like a handheld camera. And that is something you really need to step away from if you're going to use a gimbal. Now, the first thing we need to do, and what I like to do, the reason why I like gimbals so much is I like to do a lot more motivated shots. So if the couples are moving, I want to move. Or if I am doing something, they're doing an activity, I either want to do a push in or I want to do a pull out. And you need to take steps to do that. And to do that handheld is a lot more difficult. It takes a lot of skill to do that, a lot of practice handheld. Handhelding is something that is really difficult to master. And you also need to have a heavier camera. You need to have a lot more gear. You need to rig your camera out, because the heavier the camera, the more inertia it has, and the less you will get those jitters and tilts. The camera tends to stay a lot more in that position in air where it is because of inertia. So you can get it to work like that. You can use a heavier camera, but then of course you need to hold that heavier camera and it becomes a little bit more awkward and you need to balance it well. Your rigging needs to be done very effectively. So these are all the complications you have with handheld. Now, with a gimbal, your set can be a lot, even so I say lighter, but in the whole combination of some of these gimbals you can get today, especially like DJI's Mini and that, and you can have a small hybrid camera, you can get that rig pretty light and it becomes very easy to handle. So the first thing you need to realize when you're using a gimbal is when you're doing handheld, you kind of sway like this, and you can sway backwards and forwards, and that kind of is a beautiful look when you're doing handheld. But if you do that same movement with a gimbal, it doesn't look good. The way the gimbal overcompensates and then comes back, it looks very mechanical, and you can't shoot with a gimbal that way. What you need to do is, if I was moving past an object, I need to like get behind the object like this so you can get that depth of field look, and then you move across and then maybe slow down and finish the shot. You don't go back. You don't come back, because as soon as you come back, what the gimbal does is to stabilize the shot, it moves past, and when you come back, it then comes back like this, and it gives a very mechanical look. So you've got to stop shooting that. You've got to unlearn that, and you've got to start using your gimbal as a more of a object that is moving through air or following something, or it's a very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's a set motivated shot. It's not like you're someone who's just swaying. It needs to be a very distinct, that's the word, distinct shot. You're going from point A to point B. And that could be a push in like this, or it could be a pull out like this. And the great thing of the gimbal is you can take steps, although it be careful steps, and you can cover a lot more distance in a smaller time. And it gives you a really different look than handheld, and it's a lot more versatile because you can do that high up, you can pull away and go up, you can go upwards, you can come down and lift. You can also do things if you've got a wide angle lens. You can come pass by something that's very close, like you might have a building and you can look up at the building, you can turn the gimbal like this and then go through a door, and the perspectives you get are really fantastic. And to carry out shots like that handheld, I'm not saying they're impossible, but extremely difficult without a gimbal. So what do we use? What do we use when we're doing these different types of shots? You need to use different follow functions depending on the plane you want to move in. Now, if you want a plane that is moving from left to right, you put pan follow. So that's what the follow function is. So you go into your gimbal, and you've got to learn your follow function. So what you do is you put your follow function in pan follow. So as you move like this, and you turn the gimbal, like you can rotate the handle like this, the gimbal will stay in pan. It won't allow it to move like this, right? And when it goes up and down, the camera will stay dead straight. It stays. So if that's what you want, like just say you wanted to come to my face, and then you wanted to come to my face and then do a shot that it rotates around and looks at me, you would use a pan follow. Now, there's also ones where you can have pan and tilt, which then if you tilt it up like that, the camera will tilt up and tilt down, and it will also tilt like this. So it only will stabilize in that thing. So if you actually tilt the gimbal like this, the camera will stay straight, right? It'll look up, it'll look down. So that could be handy if you wanted to pass me, and then there was some beautiful ceiling work or something in the background, you could pass me and then tilt the gimbal up as you go past my face, and then it would then start to focus on the beautiful ceiling or staircase that could be a mezzanine area, and then you see that. So you would use a pan tilt follow to get that shot. Okay, so you got to think about the shot before you're going to do it. You can't just like pick up the camera and start waving it around, or the gimbal, should I say. You need to plan shots. Go, okay, what am I going to do? I'm going to go past the subject, but I'm going to go past, and maybe they're turning with me slightly, and you want to show where they're going. It could be up this beautiful staircase in a hotel. So then you would tilt it up, and then you may even follow them walking and then follow up to the staircase, and then you've got that tilt to follow them. So that's the sort of the follow functions you would use. Now, if you just wanted to do a reveal shot from down low or down high, then what you do is you set the follow function to tilt only. Now, quite a few gimbals can't do this function, and that's one of the reasons why I bought the DJI Ronin, because it can. But my other Fiotech, it cannot do this. You can only have it on tilt pan. You can't have it on tilt only. So what happens is if you try to do a tilt shot, like where you're coming from the ground or the ceiling, you've got to hold it so careful that it doesn't get a wobble in it, because you notice that wobble. It becomes quite apparent. It's quite hard to keep out of the shot. But if you can set your gimbal to a tilt only follow, then what I can do is I can start on the ceiling and bring it down like this, so it's a reveal shot, and you look going across the ceiling, as it comes down, it could capture the back of my head, so walking up that same staircase, or it could capture me walking towards the camera, and then the camera sort of disappears into the shirt. So you've got this shot where you're seeing this beautiful ceiling, and all of a sudden you see the face of this person coming quite close to the camera like this, and then it disappears in the camera and you transition to another cut. So that's where you can use the tilt function really, really well, and you don't get that little wobble in it because of the setting where you're having pan tilt, and it allows the camera to tilt. The only difficulty in this, when you set it to that follow function, you've got to make sure that you're pointing the camera where you want the camera to go, because if you set it to follow tilt and then you try to turn it, the camera won't turn because it's locked. It's locked in that tilt function. And that's a really good shot if you want to do a reveal of a subject coming from the ground. So you might be moving across some pavers really quickly, or you're walking up the pavers, or you've got a ceiling or something really high, or some buildings that you want to walk through and give that aspect ratio of those tall buildings, and then all of a sudden it drops down to the subject. It could be a couple walking, it could be a train driving down the street, or the subject is walking along a pavement in a city. So you start off seeing these big buildings, so that gives you the environment of the buildings, and as you bring the gimbal down like this, then you move on to the subject, which is what your main story is about. So that's a really great follow function. Now, the final follow function that's really handy is what they call FPV. Some gimbals call it other things. Follow every axis, right? So what that does is that allows you, the camera will point wherever you turn the gimbal. So if you tilt it, it'll tilt. If you go up, it'll go up. If you go down, it will go down. If you go round, it will follow every movement. And these sorts of shots are really good if you want to sweep along the side of something, like just say it could be something that's like you're on a wharf with a boat and you want to walk along the edge of the boat. So you want to capture where all the hooks are and the ropes are and it's tied. And as you move along, then you want to move up to the infrastructure of that boat, or move down to the water line. You can twist it, so you can come closer, twist it so it's following very closely to the edge of the boat, and then you can tilt it and tilt down where you can see the anchor or the sea or the wooden uprights of the wharf. So you can move in all directions and look at whatever you like. Or it could be just something where you want to move it onto an item that you want to distort. Like you might be coming off the wharf and then you go onto the wharf and then you tilt it down and move a lot faster, so it starts to distort, and then you can transition to another shot. So these shots can all be done using the different follow focus. Now there is one extra function. It's not really a follow function, but what it does is if you hold the button down, it locks it. So if you try and tilt it, it'll always look at the same direction, up, down. It just keeps looking in the same direction. And these kind of shots are good if you want to parallel a subject. So there could be some subjects walking along like this, but as I follow the gimbal along like this, it'll walk with the gimbal, and it will stay exactly looking at that person. It won't move, it won't go up, it won't go down, even though you may have some micro movements whilst holding the gimbal. So these are all the functions that you can do with a gimbal. And if you got a gimbal or you're thinking of getting a gimbal, you need to very much learn how these gimbals work, right? The tools inside the gimbals are very, very powerful. But if you just switch the gimbal on, balance it, and start picking it up and holding it around, you'll find it will feel very cumbersome at first, and also you won't get the look of the shots that probably what you were expecting. So you need to use a gimbal in a certain way to get the shots. And once you develop that, the shots can be so dramatic. You can have very fast moving shots that may sweep across a hedge, or as I said, you're sweeping across a wharf, you're actually walking quite quickly. And also, if you're doing something with cars, for instance, and you want to cover from one end of the car to the other and then have it swing around, gimbals are fantastic for this. It's very, very difficult to do that handheld. So gimbals can get fantastic shots that you can't get handheld. And if you want to mix handheld and you want to mix gimbal because you want to get that different feel, like just say you were you were walking behind someone, or you wanted, some people were just walking away from it, but you wanted to make it feel like you were standing there or walking behind them, you can do handheld, but I would probably get you to use a mechanical stabilizer to do that. That gives you a feel, or maybe you're really good with your camera and you can walk quite slowly with it and get the couple or the subject to walk quite slowly, and you can kind of have a little cut where they're starting to walk away and it feels like you're walking behind them because it has that kind of handheld feel. So at some applications, handheld is the better mechanism to get the shot, and in other cases, then the gimbal is the better tool to get the shot. But from my point of view, I do believe most shots look better on gimbals in general. I don't like when I watch these videos and you see all this handheld, the whole waviness of it. After a while, it makes me, one, feel like that it's not professional, and two, it kind of makes me feel like I'm on a boat or something. And as I said, some people can do it quite well where they minimize that feel, but it's very, very difficult, and I think it takes a lot of practice on how you weight the camera, rig the camera out, and how you actually use the camera. You need to develop a system where you can get the camera in such a position that you are controlling, you're slowing down that waviness so it feels nice and soft. But anyway, that's where I'm going to leave it for gimbals, because it's a tool that you need to practice and learn, and you need to have very distinct shots. But if you practice and you work with your gimbal, then that can give you really great rewards, and it can really expand the type of shots that you can get when you're using your camera to do film and video. Anyway, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it. Check out the link at the end. That takes you to how to balance a gimbal, specifically the DJI Ronin Pro, and that'll give you to the first step of balancing it. And then this video gives you the tools so you can start to use that gimbal effectively. That's where I'm going to leave it, guys, and I will see you next vid.